So we got there. We decided to, once we linked up with them, we decided to do like a flanking maneuver. By the way the streets are kind of laid out, we were able to drive down this one main street, and then there was all these side streets. So that's where a lot of the enemy were firing, was from those side streets. So I decided to take my two vehicles and to work that street and go down those side streets and fire down those side streets to kind of loosen things up and maybe gain some momentum. So the first couple side streets that we went to, we actually had insurgents that maneuvered on us in a vehicle, and they got probably within 50 to 75 yards of us. They got out with our RPGs and AKs, and my 50 cal gunner, who was very surgical, Brian Rainwater, was a former 50 cal gunner before, so knew the weapon system like the back of his hand. So he was able to engage that group of insurgents and eliminate those folks. And I felt like that really changed the tide of that whole engagement. In 2006, I was a Special Forces team sergeant. I was on my third rotation to Iraq at this time, and my detachment, we were at FOB, Forward Operating Base Apache, which is in Adimiyah, Iraq, which is a suburb of Baghdad. And from 2003 all the way till 2006, when we were there, the Sunnis obviously had a stronghold in Iraq, especially in Baghdad. But by this time, the Shia were pushing the Sunni out. So Adameia basically was the last Sunni stronghold in Baghdad. And the reason for that, primarily, one of the largest Sunni mosques, Abu Hanifa, is in Adimiyah. So there was no way that the Sunnis were going to leave, one of their largest mosques in, a Sunni stronghold, basically. So that's where we found ourselves. And I believe it was February, I think it was February of '06. A major mosque was bombed in Samarra, one of the Shia mosques, and it ignited a civil war in Iraq. So, Shias were killing Sunnis, Sunnis were killing Shia, and American soldiers were in the middle of that whole mess, and that's exactly where we found ourselves, in probably one of the most dangerous, deadliest places in Iraq in 2006. So the mission that we had was primarily intelligence collection. But where Apache was set up, where we were stationed, we worked alongside of the 101st Airborne, and they were there training and fighting with the Iraqi army. So they had responsibility for Adameia, and we had established early on that if they ever needed help, we would come help them. And then, of course, if we needed something, they would come help us as well. So that's where we found ourselves on 17 April 2006. We woke up that day. It was an administrative day for us, which sounds odd in combat, but you have to do administrative things. We were going to get a turret upgrade. We were going to get the heavy glass for our Humvees, so we could have extra protection for our gunners from small arms fire, IEDs, things like that. So that day we were going to go back to Baghdad International Airport. We were going to get our turret upgrades and resupply, things like that. But that morning when we woke up, all hell had broken loose in Adimiyah. I mean, it was right across from where we stayed. So we contacted our 101st brothers and asked them if they needed anything, because we could tell they were in a pretty nice firefight. You could hear the small arms fire, could hear explosions. We reached out. They said they didn't need anything, so it was like, okay, fine. So we left. We went to the green zone. We checked in with our company headquarters. Right when we left our company headquarters, we were getting ready to go to the Baghdad International Airport. My team leader had called, Chris Denham, and said, hey, the 101st guys are trying to get a hold of you guys. he called me on an embassy cell phone that we all had, but he said, hey, something's changed. They need some help. They need support. So the troops in contact. We'd worked with those guys before, primarily at night. So I told Chris that we would return. We'd go back to Adameia, and we were going to link up with those folks at Antar Square, which was a known area in Adimiyah. Didn't have a lot of details about what was going on. Adimiyah was a very dangerous, deadly place. We all were aware of that. So we were kind of going into this situation somewhat blind. So we got in our vehicles. We're in 2 gun trucks, which isn't very common during this time period in Iraq in 2006, because most of the convoys are 4 vehicles, 6 vehicles, 8. I mean, 2 vehicles is a very small convoy. We had 6 Green Berets, myself included, and we had our interpreter with us. So we had 7 people, 2 vehicles, very small package. But we did carry a big punch. We had a lot of ammo. We were very aggressive. So we rolled back. We linked up at Antar Square. It was actually the Iraqi army. As we pulled up, we're under fire. RPG, PKM machine guns, AK-47s. So the first thing I needed to do was establish what was going on. During this time period, a lot of the engagements that we saw was a lot of harassment, like kind of hit and run, because they didn't want to go toe-to-toe with the U.S. Army, especially Special Forces guys. It just wasn't something they did. It kind of harassing fire, and then maybe to try to bait you in, and then they would run off and kind of melt into the population. So when we got to Antar Square, the fire volume was a lot higher than we normally dealt with. But I linked up with the Iraqi Army commander and got a situation report from him, and I could tell it was a lot more serious, actually. The insurgents were actually maneuvering on the Iraqi Army and the U.S. Army, our brothers from the 101st, which is not very common. I mean, to actually maneuver towards them like, hey, we're here to fight, let's do this. That's what was happening. So we got a situation report from the Iraqi Army commander, and I gave him some the best advice I could give him as far as what we were getting ready to do and how this thing should actually play out. We did somewhat of a flanking maneuver because I wanted to link up with the Americans as well before we really got engaged. I wanted to know where everyone was at. So linked up with the 101st, got basically the same situation report from them that, hey, they'd been fighting at this time like 5 hours. The enemy had been maneuvering on them as well. They were somewhat pinned down, and they were kind of low on ammo. And they'd been requesting help, and no help had arrived. So we got there. We decided to... Once we linked up with them, we decided to do like a flanking maneuver. By the way the streets are kind of laid out, we were able to drive down this one main street, and then there was all these side streets. So that's where a lot of the enemy were firing, was from those side streets. So I decided to take my 2 vehicles and to work that street and go down those side streets and fire down those side streets to kind of loosen things up and maybe gain some momentum. So the first couple side streets that we went to, we actually had insurgents that maneuvered on us in a vehicle, and they got probably within 50 to 75 yards of us. They got out with our RPGs and AKs, and my 50 cal gunner, who was very surgical, Brian Rainwater, was a former 50 cal gunner before, so knew the weapon system like the back of his hand. So he was able to engage that group of insurgents and eliminate those folks. And I felt like that really changed the tide of that whole engagement, was that initial, surprise, speed, violence of action, overwhelming firepower that we were able to display. It really changed things, because it was, before that, it was kind of stagnant and a little bit, slow. And then all of a sudden we had a lot of momentum, and they saw that, hey, these guys are here ready to fight. And I think that motivated the Iraqi army. It motivated the 101st a little bit. And once we did that a few more times, we were able to get everyone online, and then we just started bounding forward through the streets of Adimiyah.
Wow. The citation for your Bronze Star with Valor states that you were decisive and risked yourself many times under intense enemy fire as you ran to consult with people and as part of your flanking operation. Take us into your mindset during these moments, because you make it sound so orderly, but of course all of this is happening in the middle of sheer chaos. So what kind of mindset do you need for that, and how do you process it all?
Yeah, it was a lot to process, and it was definitely a chaotic scene. But we had spent so much time. I mean, we knew the area so well. We knew Adimiyah. We knew our partners so well. I think we were just really focused on what we needed to do. We were there to engage with the enemy. All those months that we were there, we were doing a lot of hard work behind the scenes, trying to, do the intelligence collection and things like that. And here was an opportunity, like, hey, they're right here in front of us. Let's deal with these guys right now. But I felt really calm. One of our sayings back then, calm breeds calm. And I think that was very important to keep the guys like, hey, we're in control here. We're prepared for this. This is what we do. We're very well trained. And if these guys want to go toe for toe, here we are, even though we're in their backyard, but we're ready to do this. I had a very aggressive team. We were willing to fight. But I will say the bad guys, they were organized, and they wanted to engage. They threw some curveballs our way as well, because they had the roads blocked off. So, they basically could channel us down these side streets, and we were all trying to stay online. But at certain points, they had the roads blocked off, so they know that we would have to stop, and that was basically a kill zone for them, because it's an urban environment. So they had interlocking sectors of fire on these intersections where they had the roads blocked. So they know that we couldn't just flow through, because our vehicles would get all hung up and messed up. So we had to stop, and we had to clear these obstacles. And I believe that's what the citation is mentioning as far as being under fire and things like that. I had to clear these obstacles so the vehicles could continue. But they just had these interlocking sectors of fire where the gunners really couldn't support my movement from the vehicle, that nice, safe vehicle. So I had to expose myself to clear those obstacles so the vehicles could continue. And then once I could get the vehicles through, then I knew that we could have some firepower on the enemy.
It's one thing, of course, to think through this stuff. And I guess as you think through it, you're thinking of your whole team as you do this. Some people, when they're in combat, they're following orders and they're thinking about what they're going to do. You got to think about all the guys that you're responsible for. Talk about that in that moment.
Yeah, because because we had such a light package, 2 vehicles, 6 Green Berets, and 1 interpreter. We really didn't have any margin for error. If we have 1 casualty, we're basically out of the fight. If it's a catastrophic, if it's a serious casualty, we're basically out of the fight, because during this engagement, the weather was so bad, we didn't have any air support. And I think that's what made this engagement what it was, because I think the Iraqis knew that we didn't have any air support, because, the military typically doesn't fight fair ever. They always have an advantage.
Sure.
We got drones and helicopters and jets and all that stuff. But they knew that this was more of kind of a street fight, that we didn't have any air support. So with that, knowing that there's no air support, there's no medevac. So if someone would get hurt, that pretty much takes us out of the fight. and then we're leaving our 101st brothers out there. We're leaving the Iraqi army out there. So the margin of error, there was no margin of error. You get hit with an RPG, that's catastrophic. So a lot of those things, we're definitely going through my mind. Say probably about an hour, 15 hour, 30 minutes into this engagement, our engine block got shot out. So the trail vehicle had just called up and said, "Hey, D, you guys are leaking fuel everywhere." And I couldn't even relay the message to my driver, and our vehicle was dead. Had no more juice. So we had to tow the vehicle back to Apache. I was able to call back and say, "Hey, get us another vehicle, double, triple the rounds," even though we carried a lot of rounds to begin with. But get us ready to go because we're going right back out. So we were able to go back to Apache. We got another vehicle switched out, and told the 101st that we were going to be back, and we were going to bring some extra ammo for those guys because they were getting low. So we returned to the fight, resupplied what we had with the 101st, and then we continued the fight. We were able to push. Our early reports were 50 to 60 insurgents is what we were dealing with that day. I think there was probably a lot more. And this is very close combat. This wasn't, 500, 600, 700 meters away. I mean, you're so close you can see, your rounds impacting bad guys. We got to a certain point, though, once we resupplied, we were pushing the bad guys, the insurgents, back. We ended up pushing them back to Abu Hanifa Mosque. Really, there was nowhere else for them to go because right behind Abu Hanifa was the Tigris River. So they basically melted back into Abu Hanifa, and that's where we kind of ended up. The Iraqi army, the 101st, and our detachment. We were all pointed at Abu Hanifa, and fortunately, I think for all parties involved, they had enough because, anything to do with the mosque, was very, very sensitive. So luckily they melted back into the mosque and they didn't shoot. We didn't shoot, and it basically ended the engagement. We reached out to the 101st and said, "Hey, it looks like these guys are done fighting, so we're going to return to base. Let us know if you need anything." On our way back to Apache, we noticed the Iraqi police had been hit really hard by the insurgents in Adameia because they hated the Iraqi police. They viewed the Iraqi police as Shia, and the folks in Adameia were Sunni. So the more Iraqi police that they could kill, the better. But they had killed some Iraqi police. There were some vehicles and equipment that was left in Adimiyah. So we were able to strategically maneuver our vehicles and secure some of the Iraqi police vehicles and equipment and take it back. Like a couple of us jumped out of our vehicles and jumped into their vehicles to drive them back, just so we didn't want those vehicles getting into the hands of the insurgents. And I think after that, we went back out one more time because we had heard that it was picking up a little bit, but it was kind of a minor skirmish, nothing major. But yeah, 17 April 2006, I call it my alive day because a couple inches here and there at any given moment during that firefight, it could have went a different way. So I definitely feel blessed to still be here for sure.
Wow. Matter of inches so many different times.
Yeah.
Obviously, your unit performed extraordinarily well that day. We've talked about the zero margin for error.
Yeah.
But your detachment was also given a very special award in 2006 as the best detachment in the 10th Special Forces Group, and the accompanying write-up mentions a few different operations that you successfully undertook, mainly one called Operation Thor's Hammer, which in addition to excellent logistics, it's just very creative. It involves a pretty lengthy description against a specific target where you used an Iraqi woman to kind of lure him into a place where you could could get him. Explain how that worked.
Yeah, so it's called the honey pot, and it's as old as battle itself, I believe. But we had a target. I mean, we had lots of targets that we were after. This just happened to be a target that we inherited once we got to Adimiyah in early 2006 from the group that was there before us. It was someone that they were after. Killed a lot of Americans. He was an IED financer, EFP kind of guy. So he was definitely a target that we were interested in. And the problem was he was a pretty savvy guy. We didn't have a lot of great support on the signals intelligence. That was more on the national level side, that type of support. But I mean, we would get phone numbers all day long. So we were trying to figure out a way like, hey, we don't have the signals intelligence support that national level assets have, with planes and things like that they could do. So how can we do this at our level? How could we do something creative that would actually get this person's attention? So you have a bunch of type A guys sitting around strategizing and trying to figure out what we could possibly do to be able to get this guy's attention. So we thought that if we had a female that called him accidentally, and said, basically being a damsel in distress, I'll spare you guys all the details of what was going on, but it was basically a damsel in distress. Hey, my husband just left. I really need, I need you. Can you come over? And it was totally the wrong number. That was the story, right? So we had a female called him and got his attention, and then they ended the call. But he ends up being so intrigued by it, he calls her back. And this goes on for a couple of different weeks, and they develop this type of relationship. And then eventually it evolves to, hey, I really want to see you. So we set this whole thing up in motion with someone that was helping us out, the female on the Iraqi side. So we scheduled a meeting. They were going to meet at like a clothing store right outside Sadr City. Sadr City, which was to the east of Adimiyah, and that was a Shia stronghold, and that was a very violent, deadly place as well. But the meeting place was going to be right outside Sadr City in this clothing store, and our female was going to be inside, which she really wasn't. But he thought she was going to be inside, and he was going to go there and meet her in the clothing store, and they were going to have this great, first meeting, and then probably go back and do whatever. So we had this whole thing set up. We had units in place. We had Iraqis. We had Iraqi scout platoon guys that was working with us, Iraqi army guys. We had people in the store. We had people outside the store. We had a QRF close by that could respond. I was in a civilian SUV type vehicle that was driving around the area. And we thought it was going to be a little bit easier. He was going to kind of walk into the store, and we were going to deal with this guy. It actually didn't go that way. He was there. He was on the phone talking to her, and we knew that they were talking, but he didn't want to go inside the store. So it took us a while to figure out where he was and what he was doing, because he was right outside, the people that we had set up watching the clothing store. He was right outside their field of view, so they couldn't really see him. But eventually we were able to figure out that is him, that's where he's at. So our vehicle that I was in, we pulled up. I was able to get out of the vehicle. I was able to launch QRF, and he heard the Humvees coming, and he was looking at the Humvees approaching, and he didn't see me because I was coming from a different angle. So I was able to detain him and flex cuff him, and it was one of the missions that really started our rotation off just to a great start, because the amount of intelligence that he had was unbelievable. So it really set up a lot of things for us, And we didn't really anticipate, this was a guy that sometimes when you do these type of missions and targets, you kind of have a feeling like this guy's going to be armed and we're probably going to have to kill this guy. That's what we thought that was going to happen with this guy. Like, hey, he's going to be armed. He's going to pull a pistol or a rifle or whatever. And, we're probably going to have to kill this guy. But he was armed, but he never pulled his pistol, so we didn't shoot him, thankfully, because we got a lot of great intel and it really set up our rotation. So yeah, that was just it was a creative mission. It was a great way to start off our rotation.
Well, again, it was obviously a phenomenal deployment, given the award that you received. What did that award mean to you?
It meant the world. I mean, it's basically, it was like winning the Super Bowl for us. It was the best team, the best operational detachment in 10th Special Forces Group. So it really meant a great deal. And actually, early on, it wasn't something I was even aware of that we had like a best team in 10 Special Forces Group. So when I started hearing a little bit of chatter like, hey, we might be nominated for this award, it's like, oh, wow, that would be, what a privilege, what an honor that would be. So it kind of built up a little bit. And yeah, it meant a lot to everyone.
Now, you retired in, did you say 2018?
No, January of 2017.
2017.
Yeah.
We've talked with some folks who handled that transition real well. Others struggled going back to the civilian life. What was it like for you?
Well, I would say that, it's not an easy transition because, you hear like for prisoners and things like that, the institutionalized, I'd been in the Army for 26 and a half years and I guess to a certain degree I felt institutionalized. I knew I was going to get paid every 2 weeks and things like that. But I'd say when I started working with someone from one of the groups, the organizations that helps veterans, she was helping me with my interview process and skills and things like that. It's not something I was used to doing. But, being in Special Forces, being humble it gets beat into you. Like, be humble, don't be arrogant, don't have an ego, be humble, be a good team player, things like that. So that carried over to when I was transitioning into a civilian and I was talking to my mentor and she's like, hey, I get it that you're a Special Forces guy and you're humble and you're not arrogant, but you got to kind of put that behind you now because you're walking into the civilian world and you need to be able to have, you need to be able to talk to people and tell them what you've done. And it's not bragging. It's not like you have a big, huge ego and you're being arrogant about things, but you really need to let some of that stuff go and be a little bit more open and be comfortable, sharing things because you're trying to sell yourself to them so they'll hire you. So that like really resonated with me. That really helped me out a lot. So I would encourage veterans that are either leaving service or retiring or transitioning, definitely reach out to a mentor and have them help you through the process.